From its early successes dating back to a sarcastic email written all the way back in 2007, to one of the most unceremonious and ungraceful technology company falls from grace in the history of the industry. A product line spawning no fewer than 4 videos on this very YouTube channel over 11 years, whose creator's only failing was making a product too good on the first try, leaving behind a now nearly 2-decade legacy of fandom. This is a story that is both too strange to believe and still not finished yet. Folks, you read the title, you know what it is. It's time to finally review the OG Pebble. What a stupid name for a product.
I'll pick this up and check this out.
Viewers, I'm not going to waste your time here. If you're watching this, I assume you know what this thing is and that you've either seen one, used it, or at least watched one of the terrible mainstream fake nostalgia reviews of this product. Or perhaps you actually do remember it from back in the day. Much like with the Hindenburg, Pearl Harbor, the Titanic, and September 11th, most people remember where they were and what they were doing when it was announced that Pebble Technology Corp imploded back in 2016. I happened to be in the middle of a Pebble warranty claim at the time, but we'll come back to that because I actually could tell you exactly where I was when the idea popped into my head on a cold April day back in 2012 to even pursue the existence of such a gadget. I was sitting in my thinking chair in the kitchen, pondering why nobody had come up with a product in the form factor of a watch that displayed notifications from a Bluetooth-paired mobile device. As I ran a web search for that very query, I stumbled upon a Kickstarter campaign that had been launched just days earlier for exactly that thing, which, as it turned out, was actually quite novel indeed. But clearly I wasn't the only one, given that the $100,000 goal was reached in a matter of minutes, the Kickstarter record shattered in mere hours, and when the dust had settled, anonymous backers had collectively contributed over $10 million, $14 million adjusted for inflation, for what was at its core a very basic product, and essentially single-handedly given birth to an entire industry that had really only spent about 5 years in utero. I'm not going to regurgitate the entire Eric Magovsky story here, and you're welcome to read his own 10-year retrospective in his own words over on Medium. But to summarize, what he stumbled upon is something truly unique that has been nothing short of bastardized over the years, but perhaps shockingly never properly replicated. At its core, Pebble is a simple, thin and lightweight, Bluetooth-connected wristwatch with an always-on, outdoor-readable, reflective LCD display, long battery life, fast software, tough build quality, usable water resistance, and a simple but still timeless design that makes it relatively inexpensive to manufacture and sell, unencumbered by the burdens of unnecessary extras like touchscreens, microphones, speakers, Wi-Fi, GPS, fitness garbage that nobody cares about, or cellular connectivity. For comparison, I present to you the Mobvoi TicWatch Pro, a much newer product that on paper trounces the Pebble. It has all of those value-added features that I just rattled off, plus it runs Android and has an exponentially more powerful chipset while still retaining a version of the always-on LCD display. And yet, it's the objectively inferior product in almost every way. Let me explain. As a lifelong fan of portable technology, one thing I can say for sure is that there's nothing more frustrating than something working poorly in the field when I need it the most. And that statement pretty much sums up why the TicWatch Pro absolutely sucks. This thing runs on an operating system called Android Wear, which is based on Android, but it's some horrifying mutation of Android that has surprisingly little third-party support. The watch faces are buggy and unsatisfying to use because they only stay on the screen for a few seconds at a time. The device is horribly slow to show notifications, even with the helpful tweaks suggested by the good people of XDA developers. The touchscreen doesn't work at all when it's wet. It's agonizingly slow to display incoming phone calls. The chipset chugs when trying to perform any moderately computationally intensive tasks. The battery life is lackluster. The display is limited and not very readable. There's no way to officially add custom ringtones or notification noises. The thing is heavy as hell, bulky, ugly, and did I mention that everything is painfully slow? I think this is a great example of why trying to make a tiny smartphone that straps onto a wrist instead of a companion device is a horrible idea in this genre. We've known since basically 2012 that Android runs horribly on anything with less than 1 GB of RAM. So why then would someone 5 years after 2012 think that pairing exactly that with a cut-rate chipset and a dim, tiny touchscreen would magically yield better results? Pebble, by contrast, isn't even trying to be something that it's not. The software is purpose-built. It's fast, functional, easy to use, even without having to look at the thing, and the battery lasts a long time, even well over a decade after it was manufactured. Having used the TicWatch for an entire year, I can conclusively say that I don't miss even a single one of its frivolous features, except for maybe the GPS receiver. Being able to gauge my speed over ground when performing an activity that I deemed too risky for the old smartphone was kind of nice, but at no other point was even a single one of its seemingly infinite array of radios, inputs, or outputs actually missed. Realistically speaking, I think that the tangible lesson to be learned from the Pebble saga that even its own inventor missed was not to make too perfect a product immediately. And here's why. Every subsequent iteration of this device was uglier, more expensive, and didn't add any features that anyone wanted or needed. All Pebble needed to do was to get quietly cheaper and receive incremental chipset, serviceability, and battery upgrades over the years. That's it. If they had stuck to that formula, they could still have been selling some iteration of this device to this day for $29.99 and still make a wild profit off of every one, thanks to the fact that every other smart wrist wearable thingy seems to just be getting more and more expensive these days. And yet they sold these things for $125 back in 2012. I seem to remember some outlets clearancing them for something like $40, and that was probably a good 5 years ago or more. And that's not to say that these things have been without their flaws. Pebble devices have gained a reputation for build quality issues over the years that lead to poor display connector contact, causing the dreaded tearing issue. And the OG Pebble did sacrifice majorly on serviceability in order to be made as inexpensively as it was, and to maintain its thin and light form factor. Luckily, enough of these things were sacrificed to destructive teardowns that we know exactly where the insides are, and someone figured out that applying the right amount of heat and pressure to the correct area on the back of the unit will successfully reapply the needed force to restore the display's connection. I'll say that this is definitely the only time I've ever fixed a piece of equipment by stabbing it in the back with a soldering iron. But surprisingly enough, it is still working 1 year after doing that. And while the problem isn't completely solved, it is 99% better and only occasionally replicable under very specific conditions. In conclusion, this is still a pretty darn good little piece of hardware, thanks in part to Google for dusting off the cobwebs from the source code of the Android companion application, and to a third-party service that now emulates the web-based backend that provides a repository for all the little watch faces and applications. This is one of the few pieces of portable technology that is not only still usable well over a decade later, but still every bit as useful. Eric may not be doing anything particularly meaningful these days, and to be fair, neither is the guy who came up with the design for the Essential phone. It seems like this kind of genius only comes once to these folks, but what can you do if his only mistake here was releasing a product that had no room for improvement? Rip Pebble and long live Pebble. I'm Browningate, thanks for watching.